You must have seen these types of e-bikes all around the city. Or vehicles with these green number plates. But why do we see e-bikes now more than ever before? What caused the boom of this technology? How the hell do they even work? And how this company can potentially take over Tesla with their charging stations? Let's answer all that while riding one for ourselves. So first of all, why do we need these types of e-bikes? You see, there is a need for last-minute commute. Why? Let's take an example. That you come out of the railway station and your office is 3 km away from the railway station. Waiting for bus or taxi or any other public transport is just like a guessing game. It can be a minute or 30 minutes, whereas you can just unlock this bike and get going. And the icing on the cake is it's totally electric, which means you're not polluting the atmosphere with carbon dioxide and other harmful gases. Wait, let's take a step back. What do we mean by electric vehicles? Do we understand this term fully? So, electric vehicles are locomotives that work on electricity rather than petrol or diesel. Well, duh, everyone knows that. But how is this electricity created? How does it make the vehicle move? And most importantly, what even is electricity? Everything around us is made up of atoms. Yes, everything. Your laptop, your phone in which you are watching this video, your cat, your dog, and even you are made up of atoms. And what are atoms made up of? Atoms are made up of positive protons, neutral neutrons, and negative electrons. Ring any bells? Yes, these electrons are responsible for conduction of electricity. These electrons are present around the proton in different energy levels or shells. And each shell has a different capacity to store these electrons. You can imagine it as different rooms in which they live, which can only hold a certain number of people. Like the room closest to the nucleus can hold 2 people or electrons. Then after that, there is a room that can hold 4 people. But what happens when only one person lives in a room for 8 people? As you might have guessed, the person gets plenty of space to move around. In the same scenario, when one electron is present in a shell and it gets plenty of space to move around, it's called a free electron. Now, there are millions of atoms present in a single 1x1 piece of a material, and therefore millions of free electrons. When these free electrons move in a particular direction, we call it the flow of current or the flow of electricity. So, how can we make the electrons flow in a particular direction? Because initially they move randomly. We can imagine electrons as water in a container. When we want to make the electricity flow, we need to make this water flow. How can we make this water flow? It won't flow on its own. We can create a hole at its bottom, connect a pipe, and get another container below it. And then the water will flow through the pipe. What we did is we created a height difference or a potential difference. So if we can introduce a potential difference between these electrons, we can make the electrons flow through. That's where the most crucial part of the electric vehicles comes in, the batteries. All the types of batteries have these 3 parts: cathode, anode, and electrolyte. So when cathode and anode is placed in such a manner with the electrolyte in between, chemical reaction occurs, and it results in ample of electrons in the anode side and lack of electrons in the cathode side. Hence, the anode gets negatively charged and cathodes get a positive charge. Now the electrons want to go to the positive side, but cannot because of the electrolyte in between. It's just like the time when we set up 2 containers at a height, and when we connected it with the pipe, the water flowed. Similarly, when we connect wire between the cathode and anode, the electricity starts flowing through the wire. When there is no more water in the top container, the flow stops. Hence, when there are no more free electrons, the flow stops. Unless you add a pump and flow the water on the opposite direction. In the case of a battery, supplying electricity from outside to the opposite direction to recharge the batteries, so it can be used again. So based on different types of cathodes, anodes and electrolytes, different batteries can be made. They can be rechargeable or non-rechargeable. Talking about recharging, Yulu in India may take over Tesla with their charging stations. How? We will discuss about it later in the video, but let's first understand how the electricity we just produced can actually move a vehicle. Motors are like the engine of the electric vehicles. While in traditional vehicles, small explosions drive the engine, in electric bikes, brushless DC motors are used because they have less moving parts. Any motor consists of two basic parts: the rotor, that is the rotating part, the stator, that is the stationary part. Rotor rotates due to some sort of interaction with the stator. It depends on the different types of motors. In case of BLDC motors, the stator looks like this, with windings on them. These windings, when supplied with electricity, produces magnetic field. Because some guy in the 1800s said, when current is passed through a conductor, it creates magnetic field around it. Which is a very useful thing, and there are so many inventions that have been possible because of it. But in this case, it means that we can energize the stator poles to make it a magnet whenever we want. And the rotor is already a permanent magnet. So when we energize the stator poles using DC current, the rotor magnets get attracted to the stator magnet. But as it reaches the stator pole, the adjacent pole is energized and gets attracted to that pole. This process is repeated and the rotor starts rotating. All of this is kept tracked using the Hall sensors, which tells the electronic speed controller when to energize which pole of the stator. Yes, that is everything this electric bike is doing with the feedback from the accelerator. BLDC motor uses the direct DC current, but AC current is way more beneficial, therefore cars uses AC current. But we need to understand what AC and DC currents are. DC current is a direct current, which is just a straight line of constant value, whereas AC current is alternating current, which goes in positive direction and also goes in negative direction. And using this, induction motors can be made. In the stator of the induction motors, there are 3 windings at 120 degrees apart in position and in phase. So when the 3 windings are energized, the positive and negative peak of each of the 3 windings occur at different times. Hence, the magnetic field that it produces acts like it's rotating. This is called as rotating magnetic field. The rotor is a conductor and it looks like a squirrel cage. Some dude in 1831 said, whenever a conductor is placed in a varying magnetic field, an electromotive force is induced in it. Therefore, when the rotating magnetic field comes in contact with the rotor, it induces a current and a force. As a result, the rotor starts rotating, but the speed of rotation is always less than the rotating magnetic field. As induction motors have very high speed band, it is used in electric cars. And as I mentioned earlier, if we rotate the rotor faster than the rotating magnetic field, it acts as a generator and can store energy, which in terms of electric car industry is called regenerative braking. Tesla also uses these types of induction motors. In fact, the name of the company comes from the great scientist Nikola Tesla, who actually invented the induction motor and discovered AC current itself. But induction motors uses AC current, and what we just produce in the batteries is DC current. So how does this DC current get converted into AC current? That's where the inverter comes in. The inverter uses various techniques like comparing it to triangle waves, using transistors like MOSFET, etc. But really, that is very complicated and not really important for us to discuss it in this video, maybe in future. But I can't stop but wonder, if the first battery was made in 1800 and the first electric motor was made in 1832, then why did it take almost 2 decades for electric vehicles to be in trend? Back in the days, between 1830 to 1840, many individuals like Robert Anderson, Professor Sybrendas Stering created crude electric carriages, which worked using non-rechargeable batteries. This was the very first milestone in the development of electric vehicles. But this changed when a French scientist, Nicolas Gauthier, observed that the lead electrodes used in electroplating gave a secondary current even when the main battery was disconnected. And when another French scientist, Gaston Plante, researched more on it and finally invented the first ever rechargeable battery, that is, the lead-acid battery, in which the cathode was lead metal, anode was lead oxide, and electrolyte was sulfuric acid. Some years later, Camille Faure improved his design. Because of this incredible invention, the electric vehicles industry started growing significantly. Many inventors created their own version of electric cars. Electric cars were the next big thing. Companies started manufacturing electric cars. Electric cars are used for public transport. Companies started to provide exchangeable batteries to users. Electric cars were a great hit because they didn't smell, vibrate, or needed gears. The popularity increased so much in the USA that there were more electric vehicles than there were petrol-based vehicles. So one might think, at this rate, there shouldn't be any petrol-based vehicles now, right? By 1920s, the road infrastructure became better and there was a need for long-range vehicles. which the electric cars were simply not capable of. Also, large petroleum reserves were discovered all over the world, which reduced the price of petrol significantly. Scientists like Charles Kettering, Milton Reeves invented electric starter mufflers for self-starting and reducing noise. Finally, when Henry Ford started the mass production of gas cars, the price further reduced as compared to electric cars, and no one really wanted to spend extra for a short-range vehicle, and electric cars were no longer used by the people. But everyone knew that the petrol-based cars were bad for the environment, and there was still hope in electric vehicles. Therefore, companies were still producing electric vehicles, but they still used lead-acid batteries. That's why they were not well received by the people. Until something amazing happened. In Japan, Akira Yoshimi perfected the prototype of lithium-ion batteries, which completely revolutionized the industry of electric vehicles. Lithium-ion batteries were actually a way bigger deal than we think. These batteries had very high charge density, which means that we can store more energy in less space. It had more charging cycles and hence a longer lifespan. This meant that the long-range electric vehicle dream was actually possible. Soon enough in 2008, Tesla launched the Tesla Roadster with lithium-ion batteries, which was an immediate hit, and many other companies started making electric vehicles that uses lithium-ion battery. And the boom of the electric vehicles started from this era. Mainly because of Tesla's automation and AI, electric vehicles are now said to be the transportation of near future. Tesla have contributed greatly in setting up charging stations all over the world. But Yulu in India can take over Tesla by setting up the charging stations. I am saying this because Yulu has already set up charging and battery swapping stations at hundreds of places and actively working on improving the charging infrastructure in India.
Another very large partner of Yulu called Magna. So they came on board and they're helping us with the battery charging infrastructure.
Whereas Tesla is still in talks with Tata to implement charging station in India. Well, it has become easier for everyone to set up charging stations due to the new laws that make the legal side of the thing easier. Whoever implements this charging infrastructure should hurry up because the number of EV sales in total vehicles in India have increased significantly from 1.8% in 2021 to 4.8% in 2022 and 6.3% in 2023, and the number just appears to be growing even more rapidly. Government of India aims 30% by 2030, and eventually we say goodbye to petrol-based cars once and for all. It seems so incredible to me that 4 to 5 years ago we had no or very less idea about this technology, and today everyone is talking about electric vehicles, whether they are parents, kids, teens or even grandparents. This awareness is necessary for everyone to realize that we cannot keep harming the environment and keep risking our future. It is the time that we stand responsible and work towards preserving our environment by keeping the air clean for our future generations.